Welcome, everyone. When I was looking for, someone to present, I decided I would step up and just kind of share my experience with the FileMaker Data API. I have this disclaimer here that I am not an expert. So hopefully this is a nice summary of everything that I had to learn and needed to know in order to make things work. And then hopefully it will help you. And also just need to say that I've only scratched the surface of what's possible. As you will see in the demos, nothing's too crazy. Just be aware that there may be more that you're able to do. And then also I just wanted this to be kind of serve as like a conversation starter, because I'm sure others of you have also worked with API integrations and all that kind of thing. Hopefully at the end, we can share ideas. And
API, you're acquiring data from FileMaker into something else, right? Because I got a project where I need to pull data into FileMaker through an API, but this is going the other direction. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah. Well, actually, the three recent projects, and when I say recent, probably over the last 6 to 8 months, 2 projects where FileMaker needed to connect to an external API. One was the Jamf suite, which is for Apple device management. They wanted to have their inventory of things that were in Jamf pulled into FileMaker so that they could then match them up with the users. So in that case, we were pulling information down from the API. The other integration where we were working with FileMaker as the API consumer was called HappyFox, which was a help desk system that I'd not heard of until they asked me, can we integrate this with HappyFox? And of course I said, well, sure we can, it's FileMaker. And it was actually a case where we were pushing data from FileMaker into HappyFox because they were already managing their information about all of their devices in FileMaker, but they wanted to have it in HappyFox so that when somebody submitted a ticket, they could get the right asset, matched up with the person that submitted the ticket and all those kinds of things. And so that's where like those 2 projects were coming from. And then the other project is actually where we were setting FileMaker Server up as the API source. It was a national club that manages their member role in FileMaker, but they wanted to have like a little custom app for like the person could look up their membership card instead of having to mail it out, and then they would know when their membership expires and those kinds of things. And then it just wasn't feasible, given the number of users to try to do something any other way than a custom app. And so the API source allowed the app developer to occasionally pull the information in to keep everything fresh. So those were the kind of the 3 projects that set me on this journey, just because of the nature of the client data and stuff. I'm not able to connect to any of those things. But what I did do is go ahead and we'll walk through the steps of setting up FileMaker as a source, and then we'll use a local FileMaker app to then connect to the FileMaker API. So that was kind of, I thought the best way to try to show all of this without having to worry about sanitizing data and things like that. For setting up as a source, it's very straightforward. There's a privilege set that needs to be enabled for, or extended privilege, excuse me, for whatever privilege set you're going to use to get access to the data. And then you need a layout that's set up with the fields that you need. And what was interesting is that, or not really interesting, I guess, but you have a lot of options where you can just give them full access or data entry only or whatever the case might be. But again, depending on the data that you're working with, you're going to want to possibly set up a custom privilege set that gives that person or that API access only to certain specific things. And so, so I went through all the steps, everything was good. And I thought, well, I guess I'm done with that. That was easy. It's like I could set these up all day. But then when I was working with the app developer, there were some questions as to how does it work? And I said, well, here's the manual, but that wasn't enough. And so that's where I needed to actually do some testing on my end so I could be able to tell them, well, this is how you need to set up your curl options and all of that kind of thing. And for that, I actually ended up using 2 different tools. Now, the one that I'm going to be using tonight is called Postman, which I think is probably one of the more popular ones. It's nice because it has both a web interface as well as a client that will run on your desktop. But there's another one that's called RecBin, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but it is online only because when we were actually testing the API integration, we ran into a couple issues and we couldn't determine is it firewall or something else. And by using the RecBin web interface, we were able to rule out some things because we knew we were definitely coming from outside our network, so that I could come back to the app developer and say, well, it's definitely something that you're doing because I'm coming at it from outside of our network as well, instead of using Postman locally on my computer while I was working on it. So let me get into FileMaker here. And since it's roller coaster season, I decided I would use my database of roller coasters as what we were going to be querying in and out. So like I said, it starts with here where you want to set up, an account that's going to be used by the Data API. Obviously, for the sake of the demo, the username and the password are the same, which is probably not something that you're going to want to do in a production environment. But that was, again, the path of least resistance there. And then you just have to get into your advanced settings, for the extended privilege. And you'll see here this FMRest is the one that allows access to the FileMaker Data API. So you just need to make sure that whatever privilege set, has that extended privilege, linked to it. So like I said, the security was pretty easy. And then the only other thing that you really have to do then, again, is, set up the layout. Now, what I have kind of, standardized on is that the layout usually has like an API as the prefix. So I know that, okay, this is what, the layout is supposed to have, or it's used for that purpose. And the way the FileMaker Data API returns data is if the field's not on the layout, the data doesn't come back. So you do have a little bit of flexibility there in controlling, what data is available for the person that might be using the API to access the FileMaker solution. But again, that's more of security by obscurity. So if there's any questions as to what that data is going to want to be, you're going to want to go ahead and set that up in your security. But it is nice to know that if you take a field off the layout, it's no longer going to be part of the data that's returned. So I've got a couple ones in here that I set up. One is for the amusement parks, and then this one here is for the roller coasters themselves. So like I said, that was the part that needed to happen as far as on FileMaker server to get the file set up. And then that brought me over here to Postman. And what I liked about Postman, and this is another thing where I don't claim to be an expert. I don't know all of the ins and outs. I know exactly what I need to do in order to get it configured, and then do my testing to help me continue on. But you're able to create a group and then actually create the different API calls and name them and save them and make changes and that kind of thing. So it's very handy there. You have here, obviously, you can select what type of operation. The most common ones that I've used are get and post, depending on what you're wanting to do. I did actually have a situation where I used put, which I didn't even know was a thing until the documentation said, well, if you're doing an update, you put, you don't post. So just be aware that that's there. Obviously, you have your API endpoint, which in this case is the FileMaker server with some default file paths here, and then you refer to the file name as a variable, as a constant there in your URL. Now for the authorization, it's pretty straightforward. Where you come over here, there's several different types of, again, authentication that you're able to select from, as you can see there for FileMaker. And I think the other two systems that I used, it was actually just the basic authentication where you've got a username and a password. These headers here get automatically filled in. And then all you have to do here is you just click your send button. It will send the request and it comes back. And in the case of what we did here for the authentication, it returns this token. Now, different APIs have different rules. From what I've been able to tell about the FileMaker one, is that, I mean, you could re-authenticate every time you do something with the API, but it's supposed to be good, this token, for 15 minutes. So once you have that token, you can save it in a global variable and continue to reuse it until that 15-minute time limit is up. So that's the one there. The one nice thing that's nice about Postman is that if we were to make a change here, and I'll just remove one letter from the API, try sending it again, you can actually see, okay, this is what, an invalid response is going to be. So as you're thinking about, okay, what do I need to do with my FileMaker scripting even? Okay, this is what's going to come back, so you can, set it up. So let me, oops, get that saved again. And there's probably a way that you can take this information, the token that you get back, and then when you come down to actually, finding the records, when you get over here to the authorization, it'll just automatically put it in because that's the token that's active. I haven't figured out to do that. So if one of you know how to do it, please let me know. But I'll usually just, copy and paste it over, because it's not like I'm making a lot of operations. But again, this here is now a post command, or still a post command, but this is where we're performing a find to get information out. So the URL is very close, but there are a couple differences here where you're still referring to the file name, but then you refer to the layout, or just say that, okay, the layouts is kind of a constant there. Then you have the API, which is the layout that I'm using, and then this final underscore find, so it knows what operation you're doing. Again, there's some default headers that get thrown in there. And then where you have to then refer to the documentation is to set up, and I think I'm using the right terminology here, I refer to this as like the payload that you're sending. I don't know if that's right or not, but that's what I call it. It makes me happy. Yeah. And this is where you get, you have to refer to the documentation to know exactly how to set that up. And that's one of those things that where I don't know of any API that works exactly the same as the next one. So there's going to be some subtle differences that are going to have to be, figured out. And then another thing is that your mileage will vary on the thoroughness of the documentation. If you ever have an opportunity to integrate with anything from Jamf, their documentation, I don't know that I've ever seen documentation that's better as far as, trying to understand what things are happening. But then there have been a few others that I've seen where, like, okay, I think this is right, then you just have to try it. So it's a lot of trial and error. I said, obviously this is JSON, but that's something over here that you can define, what type of payload you're sending. And then, in this one here, we've got, a section set up for the query where we're just getting, every record that was modified after that date. And then we're giving it some, sort information here. So if I go ahead and send that command, it should work here. And then now we have the response where we can see, okay, this is a chunk of information just in general about the data. And then we get into the data array itself where we can see, the individual records that were returned and get some information about those. So like I said, that was what I needed to do. I know one of the questions I think we had at our meeting there last month that was posed about, handling documentation. I didn't do anything official. I just kind of figured out what I needed to do here in Postman, and then sent the third-party app developers screenshots so they could test it on their end with whatever language they were programming in. But it's probably something I probably need to do in a more official capacity, depending on the nature of the integration, if I ever run across a similar scenario. So that is setting up FileMaker as a source. And so now we can go in and start looking at FileMaker as the consumer. And it all starts with the insert from URL script step, which only requires two things, which is the correct API endpoint. Usually there's some type of base URL and then additional modifiers, as you saw, between the differences between the authentication and the find. So you just need to know what that's going to be. And then you just have to set up your curl or client URL options. And this is where Postman was helpful once again, because let me switch back over here to FileMaker, is that you hear that, okay, you've got this script step, Okay, where again, you could specify the URL, and then you can specify your curl options, which sounds great. Like you should just be able to select checkboxes or do something. But when you get into specify your curl option, it is a blank slate. And so that's where I was always intimidated by that, because I learned programming on my Commodore 64 in BASIC way back in the day. Trying to figure out how to do all of that seemed like a daunting task. And that's where the Postman was very helpful again, because one of the things that you're able to do is that, again, I'll go back to the authentication, is that when you click, you're able to actually see what the curl option is going to look like, so you know how to set it up. So where it's taking the information, where it says, okay, the authorization basic, here is, and that's a base 64 encoded combination of username, password. You're telling that you want it to return JSON, and then also that it's a request of the post variety. So then you're able to take this information, go back to your FileMaker database, and then figure out how to calculate that into the text variable, or however you want to do it, and to get the right result. Now, the one thing here you'll notice that, at least in Postman, it uses single quotes. FileMaker requires double quotes. So there's a lot of escaping of, the double quote that you're going to have to do. The other thing that I have seen based on some of the forums and other resources that I looked at when I got stuck on things, is that this backslash here is just a indicator of the end of the line. So it doesn't really do anything other than indicate that. So you don't want to include that in what FileMaker is calculating. And that is true whether it's the FileMaker Data API that you're actually connecting to, or some other third-party API. So just to be aware of that. So with that information, I was able to switch over here and I set up a couple things in some subscripts here just to help me out. And like I said, this here is, I've got a script that runs when the file opens, where I'm setting both the username and the password into local variables, but then I'm defining the base URL here, and then the authorization in a global variables. Now, again, the combination of username, password, base 64 encoded is still not the same as encrypting it, because it's still a standard as far as what it does. But at least if somebody happens to stumble across that global variable, there's a little bit of security there, because they've got to go through some effort to figure out what the username and password might be. The other thing that I ran into, let me go ahead and open this up so you can see, is that there is a function that's just base 64 encode, where you just pass it the string and then it returns the base 64 encoded text. That's how I originally set it up for the first project. But then when I got to the second project, it didn't work, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And what I discovered is that the behavior of the base 64 encode function was changed slightly from when it was originally added to the platform and to what it is now, to where it's 76 characters, and then it puts in a carriage return line feed. And because of the length of the username and the password that were for that particular API, the string was actually longer than the 76 characters. So I was getting this carriage return that was just throwing things off and messing things up. But with this base 64 encode RFC function, there's, I want to say 5, maybe 6 different, standards, if you will, that you're able to pick based on this parameter right here. Then you pass it your string. And I know this 4648, and there's one other one that do not return any line feeds. It just gives you one long string of text. So then I didn't have to worry about that anymore. So that's why that is there, not just the regular base 64 encode. So we get those two things when the file opens. And then over here with the authorization, this is where you take the base URL, add the sessions at the end so that it matches up to what the API wants to see. And then I get in here and just start defining my curl options. And you can see here where, again, you're escaping out the single or the double quotes that have to be added. Let me see, I think I have, okay, so like I said, this is the string that I copied out of Postman. And then this is what the version looks like when you convert it over to FileMaker. Now, in all of my testing, I've not had to include, like you saw, what says curl location. You can just leave that part out. And then you just start here with the request post. And then you do not have to include the actual URL because that's defined in another point at the insert URL script step. So you just kind of start with your headers. Now, one of the things, there are a number of single character abbreviations where you could lose like -H for header or -X for request. But then I found out that those are case sensitive, that, like a lowercase h or a lowercase x could actually be something different. So I decided that rather than risk the ambiguity, I would go ahead and be explicit and actually use the full name. So you can obviously do whatever your preference is, but like I said, that's why you see it, header all spelled out. The other thing that I was actually just discovered is that there's a couple curl options that obviously are not part of what I got out of Postman. And that is right here, where you can actually have it do a trace. And then you can also do this dump header. And both of those things are helpful if you're having trouble and need to do some troubleshooting. So again, like I said, this is going into a global variable. This one's just going into a local variable. So as you're using the data viewer, you can see that kind of stuff. So they don't need to be there once you have everything working, but I just went ahead and put them in and left them in. So like I said, that's that. And then this here is the script step. And you can see, again, here's our API endpoint for the URL. And then here for the curl options, I just have it, that single variable there. Now, obviously, this is, we can calculate everything here. Just the way I like to work, I find it easier to troubleshoot if I define everything in set variables and then just use them where needed. The other thing that is nice, which is for some custom dialogues and things like that, is you no longer have to have a field anymore as your target. You can actually specify a variable. So that's what I'm doing here to get the response. And then the rest of this is just error trapping to determine was it successful, was it not successful, and then what am I going to pass back to the script that called it. In the same way, let me get back to Postman. You would set up the authentication. I did the same thing for the find operation, where again and obviously you can see that this here is a little bit more involved, but it's not unreasonable by any stretch. One of the things that I found is that there is a limit to the number of FileMaker records. I believe 100 is the default, so I just went ahead and used that. And so if you're returning more records than 100, you would keep track of the offset, and then you would just kind of loop through it and do continual calls until you're able to pull all of the records down. So like I said, this here was my starting point, which resulted in this bunch of text here that I then had to recreate in FileMaker. So that brings us back over to here, and pretty much did the same kind of thing just for consistency, where I'm defining my endpoint here. You can see that we're taking the base URL and putting on some extra stuff there to get to the layouts, the name of the layout, and then what the operation is, and then the curl options. Now, the one thing that didn't take me too long to discover, I forget which project it was, is that obviously the data is a JSON, and it can get very tricky to try to escape all of that out if you were to calculate it all in here. So by using this notation right here, where it's the @ symbol, you can define a variable. And so then whenever the curl options are used in the insert from URL script step, FileMaker will apply all of the right, escaping and formatting and things to make it all, web friendly for whenever it's actually put into use. So that's nice to be able to do right there, because I can't imagine trying to go through all of that. And so that's what I'm doing, right here. where I'm just assembling, like I said, here's the query section, here's the two pieces of, the sort that I need. And then down here, because both the query and the sort use arrays, the actual setting of the elements in the JSON object are a little bit different, where you actually use the square brackets and then the number of the array, which is 0 based. So you want to start with 0, don't start with 1. And then here we have our limit and our offset, which I'm actually passing in as a couple of variables just to make it dynamic if that was something that I wanted to do. And then this step here is just, again, I'm all about troubleshooting later on. I try to make life easy for myself as I just do, format elements so that it's nicely formatted if I need to look at it in the data viewer or whatever. And then again, just come down here and it's the same kind of thing where the insert from URL script step itself is very easy because it's just, where your target is, what the URL is, and what the curl options are, which are just 3 variables. And then the rest of it is just a little bit of was it successful, was it not, and then what does it pass back to the parent script. Let me go ahead and save that. So if we come back here to my main window and click the button, and so you can see here is the response that came back for the authentication. And then over here on this tab, it's just a global field that I have where it's set up, where again, you can see that like the message portion is very similar to what we saw for the authentication, but then the response is obviously very different, where we have this data section that actually has the field data, along with some additional information about the internal record ID and whether there's any portal data, how many times it was modified. And then we get the whole way down here to the bottom. This is where you get into the actual data info, where it gives you some information about the database name. This is the total number of records that were found by that found operation that I was running. Here's the layout that was used. We returned 100 of those 215 from this particular table. And then the total record count was 537. So by pulling that information out, you're able to then, write your elegant script to loop through the right number of times to make sure you pull all of the information out. So I think that covers everything there.
Todd, can I ask a kind of a strategic question?
Sure.
So right now we have a team that works on a SQL Server database that they're importing data in big chunks from big import files, CSVs. And right now for troubleshooting, so on Tuesday, somebody does an import, and on Thursday, somebody says, hey, this data is wrong. So we look at the import file and say, well, you have garbage data right here. For forensics, how easy is it for someone who's not that technical to look into the content of this API and tell whose fault it was, who made the mistake? Because that's the sticking point we're having right now, is that they're used to data file imports, and they can do that, and they know how to troubleshoot it, and they want to go to APIs for a more immediate data transfer, but they're stuck on this question of how do I know when it goofed up, where it goofed up?
Yeah, that's a good question, Paul. And I don't know if I have a great answer. I mean, the one thing that I can say for sure is that, if the field is on the layout, at least that information is going to get, because like I went ahead and put all of my, housekeeping fields, if you will, as far as like the creation timestamp and the modification timestamp. So if that's on the layout that comes over with the data out of the API, at least from a FileMaker's perspective, you would have that information.
If you were designing a FileMaker database to feed data through an API into an external system, would you be able to capture, here's the squirt of data I sent at this timestamp, and here's the content of it? Because that
I know
enough if we could do that.
Yeah, I know that one of the things that you can do, and it's not something that I've attempted, but you are able to actually call a FileMaker script through the FileMaker Data API. So there might be some way that you could do, something through that where, the script gets called to say, kind of create like a log of what transpired. I don't know if that would do it for you, 100%, but I know that is one of the things that is possible, even though I don't have any experience with doing that. I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts they want to interject.
I would say that's a great question to ask in the Claris community.
Yeah. I don't know how to raise my hand. This is Jerry. It sounds like what you're doing is a bulk import. I wonder if API is really the right thing to be doing because you have all these other issues. Maybe just importing via OBDC could be a programmatic way that you could pull data in on a more timely fashion.
Well, we have XML and ODBC connections now, and we're using a system of hot folders where we drop a data file in, but the customer want to be able to import this specific bit of data, at this time, and we're trying to figure out how to track that, because it's gonna, in my mind, it's going to be a lot more difficult to figure out where the mistakes came in.
Could you export as you identify what you're going to use with the data API? Take that found set and export it to a separate place for them to look at if things go awry?
That's something that we've thought of is, okay, when we're about to send the data, first we pull back what there was. This is the value before we sent the data up, record that externally and then send the data, and then maybe record, here's what it is after the squirt.
Yeah.
That's a lot of overhead.
Yeah, I agreed. Totally agree.
All right. Well, I didn't mean to hijack your meeting. It was just something that we're struggling with.
Yeah. Like I said, that was the whole reason why I wanted to present this, was just to hopefully spark some additional conversation. So yeah, sorry we don't have a better answer for you though. Let me get back to my slides just to see if I missed anything. So here's a list of the resources that I used, in addition to doing a lot of Googling of things and checking out, the various FileMaker forums for guidance on things. But there's the links to the 2 API testing tools that I had used at different points. Like I said, with Postman, it has both the online and then the local version that you're able to use. There's a FileMaker 19 specific data API guide, as well as one that lists out the supported curl options, because there's a lot of curl options. And I've not encountered one that I needed to use that was not supported in FileMaker, but just know that there may be an option or two that is not. And so that will allow you to verify and check that out. So I guess that's all I have officially. Anything that was fuzzy or anything that anybody needs to go back and see, because I just blew right through it.
That was very cool stuff. You're way ahead of me on this project, and I appreciate the glimpse ahead.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I don't know that I have it 100% ready to go, but if anybody's interested, I don't mind sharing my demo file, because I know that because a lot of the things that I did in here were actually things that I saw in DevCon demo or another demo file that somebody had made available. So I certainly don't mind making that out, because I know one of the things was just setting up the find was something that I struggled with a little bit, and then realized that the setup of the find, because there's also the execute FileMaker Data API script step where you're just running it internally on the file itself. That gets set up the same way as far as what the queries and those kinds of things look like. So I was able to find a demo file that had something there. I guess just real quick, let me shift over here. Like I said, the API guide I thought was very well done, because it gets into testing and then how to, actually, I guess, writing your API calls where you can connect, disconnect. Like I said, this is where I got, most of the information you saw there. Typically, most of the examples will give you something where you can see, okay, this is what I should be getting back. So you can verify whether that's what you received or not. And then again, it has the perform find request. So you can see what the HTTP method, and then you can get into some of the parameters with a few examples. And then of course they give you the response. Let's see. Oh, the one thing drove me crazy, because there's nothing like waiting until the last minute. So I was actually working on my demo file some last night, and I could not get the authentication to work. Everything was working fine from Postman, but then when I went to test it in FileMaker, it told me that it was actually spitting back a bunch of HTML instead of JSON. And I'm like, what is happening? And this is the case where the help was extremely helpful, because I happened to read this command there where the parameter needed to be a set of curly braces that were empty. Because like I said, if I go back here, and if I take that out, save it, and try to connect, it worked from Postman. But if I tried to send it without, because like I said, well, you'll see here, the data raw is empty. And actually that was not even part of, the curl option that I had set up. But as soon as I added the curly braces, everything was happy again. So I don't know why, but thank you, Claris, for having very well done documentation. So
Todd, let me ask one other question about retrieving the data that comes back in the response. What do you do with that? Do you parse it and just look for? Do you just put it into a big text variable? Is there a more elegant way to do it than just scrolling through there and pulling out the fields you're interested in?
Probably not, at least not at my skill level. Because what my goal is for this is that I want to have a hosted version of my roller coaster database, and then the version that I store locally on my phone, I can keep everything as far as like new roller coasters or new amusement parks up to date, and I can actually use this as a method to sync the data between the offline version and the hosted version. So what I would be doing is looking for things that were updated after whatever period of time. I'm still kind of working out those details. Once the information comes down, then I would just start set up a loop and go through it. I know that's what I had done for the ones where we were populating FileMaker application using the information that came from Jamf. You just loop through it and just started pulling the fields out.
I found it very, very difficult to do that. Very unFileMaker-y like. I did something like this for the data API for my men's club group to pull down data from a membership site. And I basically had to use like 2 different custom functions and a loop to get rid of all the fluff to leave me with something that looked like a JSON that I could query using, just regular JSON tools. It seemed way harder than it should have been.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to just the difference from one API to the next, that it's a non-standard standard, if you will.
Yeah.
Where there are things that are going to work kind of the same way, but everyone has those subtle differences. I know the ones that I had to parse information out, I didn't feel like I had to jump through the hoops that you did, Jerry. So kind of like the traditional, FileMaker, writing in a loop and the JSON functions that we have worked fine. The biggest thing was just, if the information was returned as an array, which is the same way that, FileMaker actually does it, is just making sure that, when do you use the square bracket with a number in it to get, that first object.
Over that.
Yeah. And typically the way that I'm sure that not everybody does it this way, if you're more familiar with JSON, but I'll actually do things in stages where, I would get get the response element and set that equal to a variable. And then I would pull the data out of the response and set that to another local variable. And then from that point, then I would start getting, the individual elements out of the array to get down to the field data itself. Because I think, especially for like the debugging, as you're stepping through it, I just think it would be easier to do it that way. So that's kind of, how I intend to do it. Now I know, because in what I'm hoping to do with my, little side project is that since I'm actually pulling information from a copy of the same file, is that all of the field names should match up. So if I want to refresh stuff, I can use, like set field by name and do some abstraction that way. So I'm not having to, write this huge script. I can just, grab the field data and kind of loop through it in like a little sub loop. Oh, and this is one, like I said, the whatever field is on the layout. Here is a field here that you can tell just by the way that it's named. It's actually a related field. And because it was on the layout, it came over as part of the information that came with the API. So that also allows for some creativity in things.
Mm-hmm.
So you could actually have multiple instances in there of the same field.
Yeah, you can have multiple instances of the same field, or like I said, and this is something I've not done anything with. I just know that it exists.
Oh,
That if
I see.
there is a portal on the layout that you're pulling from, you'll actually see that information, down here inside of this object.
Right.
So, like again, I'm sure there's examples that are out there. It's just it wasn't something that I
So the
needed
one
to
you're
do,
looking
so I
at
didn't-
is not a port. I mean, that's a one-to-one where it just happens to be on that layout.
Correct. Yeah, because like in this case, it's actually the data that I'm pulling is the many, and the related thing is the one.
Right.
So in this case, it worked well for me. And I did some testing. I had undone it, but you can actually use this field in your sort if you wanted to. Because like I said, right now I just have it sorting by, I think, like the park ID, so that all of the roller coasters in one amusement park are grouped together, but it's by, the UUID, where if I sorted by name, that would be something that would probably mean a little bit more, especially like when you're just, doing the troubleshooting and stuff. But you can include like the fields like this can be included in the query as like your sort options and stuff like that. So anything else before I turn things over to Gianine and Rosemary?
Just a thought to your questions about some of where did the error occur?
Mhm.
I've never done this at all, so I'm just a newbie. But if the field isn't on the layout, then you can't pull it down and you can't put it back, correct?
Correct. I know you
So-
definitely can't put it down. Like I said, I haven't tried pushing it back up. So
Okay, so you may be able to build some error checking in that way with make sure the fields are on the layout that you're expecting to work with. And I don't know what are the other error codes? I mean, we've seen the one where it's 0 when it works, like when you change the password, and then there was a different one that said the password was incorrect. But maybe there's other error codes that could help you to say that
Yeah, I'm mostly concerned
unexpected error or whatever.
typing garbage data in, putting a return character in a field or something that doesn't belong and would cause an error condition in the SQL Server database.
Okay. So it would get through here, no problem. It just is
Right.
it looks bad on the other end. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be valid data, but it's wrong, and so we got to figure out who to blame. That's the thing I'm trying to put my finger on.
Okay.
any other thoughts or comments or questions? Okay, well, I will turn it over to you, Gianine.
Thank you. Thanks for letting me listen along. I'm not sure that I understood a lot of it, but I sure do appreciate hearing it. And thanks for letting me take just a little bit of time with all of you. I also want to recognize that we have a couple of party crashers also from Claris here. Rosemary and Andy, say hey to the FMburgh team. We'll make them answer the icebreaker question at the end. I've already teased them with it, so they'll have to answer the olives question, but we'll do that in a minute. So thanks, everybody. We're here just and hope this will be the beginning of repeat visits to many of our developer groups. So we hope you'll have us back. But wanted to provide some additional awareness around the Problem Solver Circle program that was launched in early May and continues through the end of June, and allow any of you to ask any questions that you might have about the program. It is still very much in full swing, and we're learning a lot from those who are joining the program about the opportunity that it creates to really remove friction and open up possibilities to expand usage of the Claris platform. That was the whole intention behind the Problem Solver Circle. And it's really to help you all do more with Claris within either the accounts that you're working with or in, or customers that have always wanted to do more, but maybe have not been able to, or haven't been able to realize the full value. So in summary, the Problem Solver Circle program, for those of you that might not be aware, is an opportunity for customers who are using FileMaker today, but maybe want to do more with it, to upgrade from their existing FileMaker license to a 2-year site license that gives access to everyone in their organization, the entire platform, everything that Claris offers. So all of the Claris FileMaker suite, plus Claris Connect, plus a developer preview of the Claris Studio, which is now available. And those in the Problem Solver Circle program are the only ones that have access to that developer preview right now. So that is a great opportunity for, like I said, accounts where there's not complete saturation. So what we realize in the question that we've gotten a lot is, what's a good fit for this program? So I would encourage you to just think about any users or customers or businesses that you know of that are using FileMaker in certain pockets, but maybe haven't fully explored other areas where the platform could add value. So those companies that we find are a really sweet spot for this are companies that have 50 to maybe 500 employees, maybe 1,000 employees, but maybe only have a pocket of 10 to 25 users. And so there's this complete open space of opportunity that could be explored. And the Problem Solver Circle program opens up the opportunity and removes the friction of license barriers by getting those customers onto a 2-year, like I said, site license with access to the entire platform for every employee in the organization. And at a, it's at a slight, but the real benefit from a value perspective is, if you look at what that customer's renewal would be for what their current license agreement is for a 2-year agreement, to get into the program, it's the cost is just a 30% premium over the 2-year renewal for what their existing licensing would be. So, we've, like I said, designed the program with expansion and removing friction to adoption and expansion in mind, so that customers can really achieve broader value of the platform and that 2-year time period to explore and do more, and to give our developers the opportunity to have those conversations about what else would you like to do? Where else can we go with this? Because now Claris has given us an opportunity to do that exploration at a slight premium for a 2-year period. And they've made it a lot easier for us to do that. So that's what it's about. I'll stop talking for a minute. I can put some reference links in the chat here for you all to save and review and share with others as you feel appropriate going forward. But does anybody have any questions? Rosemary, Andy, do you have anything that you want to add or clarify if I stepped on myself?
Well, first, hi Todd. It's good to see you. It's good to see some familiar faces and names. I think Mr. Mako, it's been a long time. I was just curious to ask the group, had y'all heard of it before? We've been talking about this at different meetups, and we had a webinar about a month ago. But is this new news, or is this something that you're already aware of?
I knew about it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm a partner company, so yeah, we're working on our studio project as well.
Awesome.
And we submitted a couple
exciting
clients for it.
Nice.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think to add what you said, it's an interesting mechanic, this particular program, because we're doing something we kind of never did before. If the basic premise is our developers are awesome, our developers, build value for clients, we want to make that easier. And so the idea that we're actually pricing or packaging the program based on your existing license, so every customer has a unique price proposition, is just kind of wacky. It's crazy, right? And so, like, a lot of customers who come to us like, this doesn't make any sense, but it kind of does. And we have a lot. We know from our data that we have a lot of customers that have a large employee footprint relative to the number of seats they have already licenses with us, and we believe they're getting value out of the platform. They know they're getting value out of the platform. They renew with us every year, but they could do more. Why aren't they? Like, why don't we remove licensing as an inhibition, as a friction point, and just say, have all our stuff for all your users for 2 years, go to town, And at the end, if you used it to produce more value for your organization, then we'll true up the licensing and everybody's happy, right? So we've had great success with this over the last 4 weeks. We're limiting it to 5 customers and we're shutting off the spigot on June 24th. But yeah, the number of customers that come to us has been pretty remarkable. And to reinforce what Gianine was saying, that the pricing is that you need to commit to 2 years with a price increase of 30%. It's not everybody. And one of the lessons I think we're learning is that the sort of micro businesses or the companies that have 10 employees, 5 employees, that's a big financial commitment. And so it's hard for the small companies to want to adopt, but it's easier at some level. And sorry, I should say, particularly in the current business climate, like it's hard out there right now. We're just getting out of pandemic. People have been struggling to keep businesses afloat, particularly the micro businesses. So we get it. If somebody says, yeah, it's not for me right now, that no problem, right? We're trying to make it better for people, not increase burden. And so if the small businesses aren't ready to sort of absorb the burden right now, that's fine. But we definitely have a collection of companies that all seem to be trending in the mid-market space that have hundreds of employees or tens of employees and can invest more to innovate through crisis and then win at it. Those companies seem to be, it's working out rather well for them. So we got a couple more weeks to go at this, and we hope we can get every customer that wants in there to experience the platform for 2 years with no restriction and to get a little taste of Studio before the rest of the world. So
I want to add something to that too. Like what we've also done that is different than anything we've ever done before is provide additional customer success and support for the duration of the 2 years that those individuals who get it or those customers who get into the program have it. So we really want to ensure that they're getting the full value of over the 2 year period and have all the support needed to find success and to determine where else they could and maybe should be exploring Claris FileMaker Connect or the entire platform. And we've put a customer success engine and model behind it in a way that we've not done in any other that I am aware of in any specific packaged or programmatized way. So that's pretty unique about the program as well, worth noting.
Yeah, and for our partner organizations, I think there's an enduring opportunity as well. I think we have and by the way, fully half the customers that are coming to us are being guided by a custodial partner, right? Partners are bringing customers to us for at least half of the customers that are joining the program right now. So that's just a great signal in terms of the health of our relationship with our partner community and what they mean in this equation. For the other half, there may be opportunities. If those other half of customers don't have a partner they're engaged with, we believe that is the best possible thing for them to do if they're going to want to expand and use the platform in many cases, maybe most cases. And so I think there's an enduring opportunity for our community of developers and partners to really try, we can, the customers that are in the program presumably are committed to doing more with the platform, right? They either have a backlog or they just have an idea that they can get more value from it. So next it's like, okay, well, let's learn about that. Let's figure out best ways. What are the next common use cases we want to solve for, best ways to engage with the partner? Is there a sort of value stream map that we can repeat for customers so that they can really commit to a continuous improvement strategy that just works and delivers value? If we get some learnings from this community of customers, then I think that benefits potentially all developers and all partners because we can just get smarter. I'm excited for the 2 years ahead of us. We may stop letting people in at the end of the month, but the program itself endures, and I think it will have value for the whole community. Am I crazy? I am crazy, but need some validation here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I know for us, when you guys announced it, we were excited.
Yeah.
So
it was interesting. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to ask, for any of you that maybe have talked to customers or are having conversations about this out, in your respective networks, what are you hearing? What is some of the feedback you might be getting? And we're open, we want to hear it. It's just, this is such a good learning experience for us, not only for this type of program and packaging of the way we are delivering things to market, but also, the experience that people who are getting into the program are having is good for product as well. It tells us in both capacities, what gives us insight into that. So I'm just wondering if you're getting any feedback that you'd like to share with us.
Well, I guess I can share a little bit. We're not too far into the project, but the one customer that we have that's in the program is K through 12. And so we've been busy with end of year school stuff, making sure everything's going to work for them. But I know one of the things that they're looking forward to is they use Skyward, which is one of the connectors that's available through Claris Connect. And we had conversations about that, I don't know, a year or whenever the Skyward connector was first announced. We had some discussions, but I mean, this is not a school district that's in an affluent area. So, every penny counted, and, they had to spend the budget wisely. So the program was a perfect opportunity to expand things a little bit. And then at least, we can see what that's all about and move forward. So I know the school was excited because they've already come up with a couple ideas of things they want to tackle here over the summer once the school year's over and all the iPads have been collected. So
if there's iPads, I'm assuming then they're an Apple customer at some level. Have they looked at Connect for ASM, Todd?
That I don't know. I know they actually use Jamf for a lot of their device management. And I don't know how much there is an overlap between it and Apple School Manager. But that was actually the API integrations. One of the ones that I did that inspired what I was talking about tonight was connecting, FileMaker to Jamf through the API. So I'm not sure where ASM would fit in there, but that could be something that comes out of this now that it's, easier to connect. So
100%. Okay. Exciting. Yeah, we had a school that had a campus deployment that got into the program recently because they wanted to start repeating their deployment of our platform across other campuses. And so the program just made total sense for them. I actually wasn't expecting to be here tonight because I was with the Atlanta group tonight, who was scheduled at the same time, but we wrapped a little early, which is why I jumped over when I heard Gianine was here. Thank you and for letting me crash. But I had there's a question that came up there. That was the developer had a customer that had roughly 200 employees, but expected to grow to 2,000 employees in the course of the next 6 months. And so the question was, are they a good candidate for this program? I'm like, well, all else equal, yeah. Like if I were that customer, I would do this program in a hot second. If they knew they were going to get to 2,000 seats and they run a lot of their business for 200 employees already on our platform, so it was likely they were going to want to increase anyway, then sure, take advantage of us. Like, go for it. Like, what are we we're not going to say no. If the timing is opportunistic for the customer and it's a perfect time for them to, then yes, like make it happen. We're not, there is really no governor or restrictiveness on our end to making this work. We just want it to work for the customers that are looking at the program. And in some cases, if it gets complex, because the licensing being unique to every customer can get a little squirrely. If you've already got a long-term commitment with us and you've already got a site license, it wouldn't seem to make sense, but it might. And so our sales team will work through the variables for any customer to try and make it work if they want it. So Beth, I hear you say you're already playing with Studio?
Yes. I have not had I have a weekly session on my calendar to try to move it forward. Have there been any changes since last week? Because I have not done that yet this week. But
if there were, you would know better than me. I don't have access to it right now. You do. I honestly don't know the day-to-day there. It is evolving in relatively fast fashion. So it's very likely things could be moving. We're limiting right now access to the customer base for this program for a variety of reasons. But one, it allows us, we an ATS program with a select set of testers. But we wanted to get to a better scale and also have customers that would put it into play in the real world and test use cases, right? Like we believe it's ready for prime time at that level, at the scale of the program right now. And then that will give us a lot of information to inform us when we go broadly public. For those that don't have access to it yet, including me, it'll come soon enough, and we'll start sharing more broadly. We did ask our platinum partners to play with it, demo it, and then reflect those demos out on the community so folks can see more if they're curious about where it stands right now, because it is very much a first release, right? It's very limited in scope and what you can do with it, but it has specific utility, which is pretty compelling. for anybody that doesn't have access to a Platinum partner to see a demo right now, Richard Carlton, I believe, did a live stream where he showed it off as part of his obligation as a Platinum partner to share with community. So the word is starting to get out there and we can see more of it.
Yeah, and we should have a video out kind of just showcasing current capabilities in the next day or two. So watch Claris YouTube or the website.
If there are questions about Studio, happy to take them. I can't promise I can answer them, but I can answer what I can. And if you have questions, happy to take anything. Also, we have an impending release that we'd love to come back and talk to y'all about maybe at next month's meeting.
Yes, we would like that.
And not to overly tease, but Peter Nelson in our presentation 5 weeks ago also reaffirmed that we are full steam ahead on FileMaker as a platform. We're not just doing the cloud stuff. And we do have a 19.5 in pipeline that we're going to be releasing relatively soon. We're working on that right now. There's a 19.6 that he committed to down the road as well. But 19.5 is going to be, I think, just a compelling upgrade for anybody that's on the platform already. It's tons of bug fixes in there. It's the primary focus is performance, stability, and security. But there's some other nice nuggets in there from a feature standpoint for administrators as well as developers, for server admins and whatnot. So it's going to be a good upgrade.
So I wasn't lying, like we'll be back, I think is what we're saying.
If you'll have us, you bet.
Well, the
Todd, maybe I'll
invitation is always open.
Yeah, maybe I'll have some
Yeah.
stories about roller coasters when I get back.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, we were talking about this in the Atlanta group a few minutes back, but I think it's interesting how in this virtual era, groups themselves have almost transformed in their own identity, right? Geographical specificity isn't necessarily a governor anymore, right? We can have people visit from anywhere. And so it's easy for us to do this. And it's important, I think, that we are in more continuous communication because our product release schedule will be more continuous. So we just wait for a big event every 18 months and then have a big splash. We need to be communicating broadly. So we will make every effort to attend when we can, when we've got more to talk about and answer any questions y'all have.
Sounds good.
Really, it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's good to see you. And if anybody ever makes it back to Pittsburgh, we'll make sure there's a Primanti sandwich somewhere along the way. So.
Oh my God, I intend to be back in Pittsburgh, so don't you? And Burgatory is like definitely please tell me it is still there.
It is still there, yes.
I was
As
there
far as
last,
I know.
took my son for dinner last week for his birthday.
I love it. Real quick, olives, Rosemary, green or black, yes or no?
I like pretty much all olives. Like I would say
It's an
my
nonsensical question.
least favorite are like the canned black ones. But like put me in front of the
Yeah.
olive bar at any fancy grocery store and I'm very happy.
My kind of gal. Andy.
Yeah, green on an egg sandwich, black on a pizza, Kalamata on my salad, like all of them. Like I love olives, right? Yeah.
Perfect.
Forget about it.
And you did tell them it's National Olive Day. We just didn't come up with this question at random.
Oh, I forgot that part. That's how much I love olives. Like I'll talk about them all the time.
I think dinner just became an egg sandwich. I'm gonna go have some. That sounds good.
I had some earlier. I didn't even know. National Olive Day. See,
Any olive detractors? I know some people don't like them.
several people here
I'm
do
not
not.
a fan.
Not a fan. We're good.
I guess anything else from Claris before we move on? I don't want to cut you guys short, but I know want to be sensitive to everybody's time.
No.
Is anybody planning or interested in attending the event that Proofgeist and Soliant are putting together in July? There's going to be a virtual live event happening late July. Is that news getting around?
We've signed up for it. We plan on being there.
Yes, and
I think we'll support it however best can.
Yeah.
I just dropped the
Excited
link
for
in
that.
chat for anyone who didn't know about it.
Have the
You know,
email
also-
saying they're supposed to read.
Also, I happen to live in Atlanta, Georgia, and Proof is bringing the Pause on Error live in-person event back to the North Georgia mountains in October, I guess. So it's a smaller event, but I look forward to attending that one again. And I think Gianine may join this year. So
Yeah, I'll be there. Yep. Don't mind me. It's almost bedtime, so I'm just brushing my dark hair.
hi,
All right.
Ayla.
Say hi.
Does anybody
Thank
have
you for having
one?
us.
Yeah, does anybody have one more thing before I move on to the wrap-up slides?
Not tonight.
Okay, once I know we're quickly approaching the 8:30 hour, so let me share my screen again. So the first one, I think I included this in the announcement emails, but FMburgh was invited by Dig FM to participate in their FileMaker Feature Fight Club, or the FileMaker Feature Duel, depending on how you want to call it. That's Thursday, June 9th at 8 p.m. Eastern. For those of us out here, you can sign up for it either through Meetup or the community. They had one last year, and I didn't fight anyone, but I did listen to the conversation. It was some pretty good stuff. So if you have time in your schedule, I definitely recommend that. Also, we already touched on it, the Auto Enter Live.
Can I just add one more thing too? I know we talked to organizers this morning or earlier today, and they are still accepting speaker proposals as well.
Okay, thank you. And then Andy touched on the pause on error. So that's Monday evening, the 24th through like Thursday at lunchtime-ish on the 27th. And then I'll make sure all of these links are in the follow-up email so you can click on them and read more details rather than having to try to copy down the link now. And then just some shameless self-promotion. Cross is doing a lunch and learn later this month. Still trying to figure out what I'm going to be talking about, but I'm leaning towards constraints because everybody does lots of finds, but there's a lot of times where a constraint would help a user out. So it might be something that's a little bit more for the user rather than the developer, but that will be there. We asked a few questions following last month's meeting, where we had our Would You Rather roundtable discussion. You can see there that using the insert from URL to send HTML formatted emails is very popular. As with most things in FileMaker, the answer is always it depends as to which is the best way to accomplish something. So there's that. We also asked the question, which new features of the platform have provided the most benefit to you as the user or the developer of the FileMaker solution, because May marked I think the 2-year anniversary of FileMaker 19's release. And so all of the features got a little bit of love, but the one that was in the majority was, as Andy had mentioned, we get new stuff every 3 to 6 months instead of having to wait for 2 years for a major release. So there you go. And then the last question was, which of the highly anticipated Hollywood blockbusters are on your must-see list for 2022? And as you can see, FileMaker developers, we love our superhero movies, and we also feel the need for speed. So there you go.
All right, I'm going to drop one more link in the chat because my husband, which some people may know and some people may not, is a aerobatic pilot. He had a little fun this weekend in honor of Top Gun Maverick.
Okay.
And
It's a very cool video.
And here you go. And I'm just going to drop in, like, he also had 2 comments on it, which were, you can use scroll controls in the upper right. It's shot with a 360-degree camera, so you can look around and look out the sides of the plane or at his face, and bump it up to 4K in YouTube if you can. So I'll just share something fun.
Well, thank you.
FileMaker's not fun.
Yeah, so just a reminder, because we take our customary summer break, because we're always real close to the July 4th holiday, our next meeting will actually be on August 3rd, that first Wednesday of August. We already touched on the FileMaker Feature Duel and Auto Enter Live. And the other important date is that Thor: Love and Thunder storms into theaters on July 8th. Notice what I did there, where it storms in, because we're talking about Thor, but I may have just done that to amuse myself. And I think that's it. Next topic is we'll tell you when you're older. So that'll probably sometime mid-July. We'll find out what we're going to be talking about. Depending on the number of people that participate in Auto Enter Live, since in years past, we've done a post-DevCon meeting where we kind of just talk about everything that we like. We may actually do a roundtable and talk about Auto Enter Live. We'll wait and see how many people are able to participate. So I think that's it.